Welcome back to Design Thinking and Innovation, the tool section, week 7. We're going to be looking at very interesting tools. Okay, so these are tools which will help you map and visualize the information that you have with respect to your topic. We look at 3 tools, one mapping tool connected with artifacts, another mapping tool connected with activities, another mapping tool connected with the environment or the spatial dimension. Okay. You just need to do one of them, but it's good to have a look at all 3 of them. So, it's section T7, week 7. We're going to be looking at artifact, activity and spatial mappings. What are mappings? Mappings basically help you to visualize the information or the data that you've collected with respect to your topic. And when it is made visible through these mappings, it makes it easier to make cross connections because you have them in the same place, and you also get the big picture or the whole picture at one glance. And can be done from different points of view. Okay. So, for example, you can do it from an artifact point of view, which includes objects, media, services or the built environment. You can do it from a spatial dimension or a temporal dimension. You can also do mappings with respect to your cognitive, behavioral or sensory abilities. Also, it can be with respect to the social, narrative or sustainability factors. We're going to look at 3 of them: artifacts, activities and spaces. So, for our analysis, we look at 3 types of mappings: artifact mappings, activity mappings and spatial mappings. Okay. As I said before, you need to do just one of them. It's good to have a look at all 3 of them. Let's look at the details of these mappings. Let's look at artifact mapping. So, here you can actually visualize objects, media or services connected with your topic, and they are shown in relation to each other. In activities, you can actually map it across the time dimension. Okay. So, it could be one day in the life of your product or the user. It could be the user journey mappings from start of the activity to the end of the activity. It could be life cycle mapping, that means it starts in some place and gets back to the original place, especially meaningful products. It can also be causal mappings. Okay. Causal are that the interdependencies of the variables are connected together. Okay. So, you kind of do a network of them, that could be the causal mappings. Let's look at the spatial mappings. It's also known as the environmental mappings. The various spaces or environments that are connected with your topic are shown in relation to each other or in a spatial dimension. So, you can have physical spatial mappings, or you can connect them up together to get a spatial connectivity mapping. Let's look at how we do these mappings. It can be drawn individually or in small groups. We've mentioned this before. Working in small groups, you share responsibilities while doing the mappings. How many of these mappings? I've been saying that it's fine if you can do just one of them. Okay. So, that's the minimum, but if you feel like you can do all of them. Okay. The mappings are kind of similar to each other in many ways. Okay, except that the focus in them changes. You see, one is to do with artifact, one is to do with an activity, and third is to do with the spatial dimension. Okay. So, suggestion is that you select one that is most relevant to your topic and do one mapping. Okay, and you are free to try all of them. So, let us look at what are artifact mappings. So, artifact has to do with objects, media, services or the built environment, buildings and structures. So, the artifacts that are connected to with your subject are shown in relation to each other, okay? And you can do it according to timeline, location, costing, complexity, types, usefulness, etc. But the factors could be many. Okay, so you can choose any one of these and do it. Okay, it's not that confusing. It's actually very simple to do. Okay, so basically it means that you're taking the artifacts connected with your topic and mapping it in relation to each other. So, if you look at the steps, list all the artifacts connected with your topic, make a mind map of the different artifacts, okay, and decide the criteria on which you want to organize these artifacts, whether it's going to be a timeline or a location or costing, complexity, types, usefulness, etc. And you organize these in the given space, connect them with links if it's essential, draw inferences from these mappings, you look at them and you can actually conclude some factors, yeah, and make a list of these inferences. Okay, so step 1 to step 7, very simple: list, make a mind map, decide a criteria, organize this in a given space, connect them with affinity links, draw inferences, and I make a list of it. Let's start with a mind map. The example here is traditional Indian toys for children, and it has been classified into 3 categories: the cognitive toys, the physical or the sensory toys, and social toys. Okay, so the cognitive toys deals with the cognitive abilities, the physical toys deals with the sensory motor capabilities, the social toys deals with social abilities, right? And you have listed as further branches the toys connected with each of these domains. And right now it's shown as bubbles and the words are written there. And of course, you can replace it with visuals. So, you can see that here mapping Indian toys according to the capability categories, and as soon as you put the images in them, you can actually cross connect them. Okay, so at a glance you kind of see the world of the Indian toys, the variations, the variety, the materials and other factors, right. And of course, you can look at it from another point of view. Here it has been categorized according to its materials. Okay, so you have the wooden toys followed by metal toys and the mixed material toys. Okay, so this is another category. So, you can look at it from sustainability point of view. Okay, you can see which are easy to make and which are not so easy to make. Okay, so the factors with respect to production and manufacturability comes into play when you look at this mapping. Or you can do it in another dimension. For example, here it's a scale has been used. Okay, some toys which are simple is one end and complex is on the other side, and those which are costly and affordable is on another scale. So, you have 2 scales here. Okay, and very interesting mapping turns out. Okay, so you can have toys which are simple and affordable at the bottom left quadrant. Okay, and you have simple and costly toys at the left side top quadrant. Okay, on the left side top quadrant you have toys which are costly and complex, and the other one has complex to affordable toys. Okay, so this is a very interesting classification of the toys. Okay, so it means that you need to choose the criteria on which you want to actually map out these toys. Okay, so that's an example. So we look at further examples. This is from Memphis design movement. Okay, and the different designers who were responsible for the Memphis movement, their products has been shown here, and at a glance you can see what kind of colors they used, what kind of shapes they used, what kind of material combinations they used. Okay, so it gives you a very nice big picture of what this Memphis design movement was. Okay. Or for example, here if we look at this is actually the T route across the edges, okay, and you can see that the artifacts connected with that, medias connected with that, the services connected with that have been mapped in quite a lot of details in this map. Okay. So, you can see the chests and vessels which are used for tea making, okay, chests for storing tea, and you can see the medias, the paintings and things like that which came out of that. Okay, and you can see the transportation modes that were used, because tea was transported across very large swaths of land, and you can see the tea making on the left side top. Okay, all the pots and vessels which are used for making tea are mapped out there. So, you can see that at one glance this map actually gives the world of the tea itself. Let us look at another example. This is from the Bauhaus design school, okay, and you can see that the mapping is from projects and products and exercises which the students and faculty did from 1913 till 1926, the period of the Bauhaus school. And at one glance you can see the modern movement over there, the different types of objects that they did. Okay, and because this was a precursor to the design movement itself, okay, and at one glance it kind of summarizes all the factors which are part of the Bauhaus movement. This mapping is a very simple mapping across the timeline. It shows all the coffee makers, okay, from a period of time, and at one glance you can see how it has developed from a very traditional method to something which is modern here. Or for example, this is an example of devices within a bedroom. So, the project was to look at a smart way of actually interacting with the objects or the devices inside the bedroom. So, all the objects and devices, you can see the fans, you can see the lightings, you can see the sun outside, you can see the curtain, you can see the workplace on the top and the bedroom and the interconnected rooms. So, very nicely, if you are solving a problem like this, putting that in a spatial dimension, putting the artifacts in a spatial dimensions becomes very helpful and useful for drawing inferences for your study. So, let us go on from artifact mappings to what are activity mappings. So, activity mappings are activities or a process that happens across the timeline, again with respect to the topic that you are trying to do. So, the different types are, you could do one day in the life of a person or an object. You can do something called as the user journey mappings. That means that when he's starting from activity A to B, you kind of map out all the factors, life cycle mappings or causal mappings. Okay. So, we will look at examples for each one of them. So, let us look at one day in the life of, it could be the user, it could be the product or the service. You kind of document all the sequence of events from time A to time B. Okay, and when you look at it, okay, at one glance you see the different activities the person or the product or the service has gone through. It could be a few hours, a day, a week or even a year or more. Okay, so, the time is kind of flexible. So, let us look at journey mappings, very similar to one day in the life of. It starts from beginning to point A to point B. Again, it could be an user, product or a service, but then you actually make it in relation to other factors which are related to it. Okay. So, you could connect it with the environment, the artifacts, the time, the feelings, etc. And let us look at life cycle mappings. Life cycle mappings is quite similar to the other mappings, except that it actually completes a full cycle and comes back to the starting point. And the last one is the causal mappings, which basically looks at interconnectedness between different variables for a particular subjects. Okay, so you can actually even depict the direction in which the activity happens. Okay, is it unidirectional or bidirectional, or it is a loop which happens. Okay, so we look at examples for each one of them. They're extremely simple to do, quite enjoyable to do it. Okay, so let's look at some of them. Okay, so the steps are: you start with an activity connected with your topic. Okay, you need to select a timeline, whether it's a day or within a day or a week or a month or a year. Okay, you need to make a timeline of the different phases of the activity. Note them as keywords. Okay, and organize this according to a given space. Okay, either you can use the x-axis or the y-axis to, or even it could be circular to depict the time axis. You could make use of colors to differentiate, arrows to show the connections and directions, and you need to draw inferences from this mapping after you do it. Okay, and then make a list of these inferences. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Okay, so this is one day in the life of a child. He wakes up, gets dressed, has breakfast, goes to school, then classes, then laboratories, back home, then play, then watches TV, dinner, plays toys and games, and goes off to sleep. Typical day in the life of a child. Okay, bit of the emotions are also shown there, but at a glance you kind of get the feel of what a child does. Let's have a look at a journey map of an autistic child. Okay, and you'll see that it starts from morning till evening, and so you have the timeline over there. Okay, and you also put in the environment, okay, the relationship or the stakeholders, the different activities the child has to go through, okay, the feelings the child has, and probable tools the child might be using. Okay, so you look at it, the difference between the first and this, a day in the life of a child versus the journey map, is that in journey map you are actually looking at many other factors in addition to the main activity which happens. Okay, so start with keywords. Okay, and if you can replace them with images, nothing like it, because it suddenly the map becomes visible and visual. Okay, and you can see the environments very clearly the child has, the relationships, okay, from families to teachers to friends to mother to therapist, again back to friends, and yeah, even the teddy bear becomes an important stakeholder for the child. Okay, and the different activities the child goes through from morning till evening. Okay, what is the feeling of the child? Okay, happy, kind of okay, then again not so happy, and then becomes very happy and then goes to sleep. Okay, and also you can see that the child can make use of these tools. Okay, so you have the textbook when he's in school, you have notebook to take notes, he has to do writing, that's the homework. Okay, then he uses the computers, and then toys and games become the other object or the tool that he uses, right. So this gives you an overview of the child with respect to many other factors. Let's have a look at the life cycle map of a toy. Okay, you can start anywhere because it's kind of circular from what you see here. Okay, so if you start with the trees, okay, it's taken to the workshop, machined and colored and made into wooden blocks, and these become toys for children, which is packaged and then transported to a shop where it is displayed and then purchased by the parent typically, and then given to the child. The child plays with the toy many times when with friends over a period of time, and at one point of time it goes back to the recycle bin and it's recycled. okay, and then finally finds its way back into the tree itself. Okay. So, this is a full cycle showing the life cycle of a toy which is meant for child. Okay. You might be having a product which does not have a full life cycle. So, it might be nice to even map that out and see where the life cycle breaks, and if you can actually make it okay, into a full life cycle, then it becomes also sustainable. Let us have a look at the causal mapping. The topic here is again the child, but with respect to the healthcare. Okay. So, all the facilities that are connected with the healthcare are kind of mapped here. So, you can see that the child parent is very important. Okay. Child has to go to meet the doctor in a hospital. So, the hospital becomes important, and child from home needs a transport to go to the hospital. Okay. And the doctor is connected with a nurse who administers the treatment for the child. Okay. And the child with the parent is making sure that it's usually the home cooked food that is given to the child. Child likes to play. Okay. And if you look at the hospital, hospital is connected to the medicine which is actually got from the pharmacy. Okay. So, if you look at the factors, they are all interconnected in some way or the other. Okay. The positive interactions are shown in green, the negative interactions are shown in red. Okay. So, the positive ones are things that have to happen, okay, and there is a method of happening it, and the red ones kind of show some reluctance. For example, the child is reluctant to meet the doctor, reluctant to get the treatment, okay, and reluctant to eat always the home food, okay, but very happy to play, right. So, there are some positive things. Okay. So, this kind of maps out the relationships or the interconnectedness of the relationships, okay, within a system itself. Okay. So, this is known as causal mappings, and very good to understand how parts play an important role in the big picture. Let us look at some more examples. This is an example of doctor-patient interaction. Okay. So, the doctor logs into the system, looks at the schedule, makes the first appointments, looks at the software, and then prescribes which the secretary inputs into the system. That becomes the prescription for the patient, and he actually gets it on his computer or mobile. Okay. So, just the start process of it. Okay. So, for example, here a medicine treatment sequence has been shown from registration, waiting room, diagnosis, prescription, going to the pharmacy, getting the medicine, and then taking care of yourself. Okay. So, if you look at it, you have consultation and packaging which is necessary. There is a medical history database which needs to be managed. There is a prescription system which needs to be managed. Okay. Literature is something which is not there. So, if you look at the ones which are outside the main line, those are interventions that can be done through design. Okay. So, this is a medicine treatment sequence activity diagram. Here, for example, a planning required for an arts performance project is mapped, okay, right from story creation to script to writing the poems and creating the music for it, and then creating the visuals for this, and then putting the dance together and the drama, okay, and then lighting comes into picture, okay, and then the performance itself happens. Okay. So, there is also the audience, okay, the recordings and the reporting of that, right. So, it kind of at a glance shows what it requires for an arts performance project to be done. If you remember the models of design thinking and innovation process with respect to Indian knowledge systems, we looked at the different phases. It goes from observations to critical analysis, creative variations, learnings, implementing and validation of it. And if you look at it, it's just nothing but an activity mapping, and at one glance it gives you the big picture of how Indian knowledge system can be part of the design thinking and innovation process. This is another very nice example of a vegetable service ecosystem. Okay, so if you look at right side bottom, you can see the vegetables are grown by the farmers, and this is inputted into the system. Once it's inputted into the system, it can be brought by a consumer. It can be ordered through the mobile or the computer. Okay, and then it can be transported to places where, for example, if somebody is actually making food at a restaurant, okay, so it can get into that. Okay, so the ecosystem, if you look at it, parts of it are shown here, and the interconnectedness is very clearly shown. Yeah, so how you can actually digitize this aspect of getting vegetables right from the place where it is grown to the place where it is made into consumed. Okay, so as a livelihood, this becomes a very nice example of an activity. You can also do it for showing history. Okay, so it's an activity temporal mapping of history of Shintoism. Okay, right from the 4th century to the present times. Okay, one by one, the different aspects which were very, very important are mapped with description of them. This is a temporal map of documenting the spread of Christianity right from 2000 BC to the present times, and the major phases of this has been mentioned over there, and you can see the countries are color coded. It's done in a circular dimension, and you can see that the spread of the religion is shown as graphs around this circular visualization. Okay, so at one glance you can kind of make out the spread of the Christianity through the ages. This is again an extremely interesting map, okay, by Professor Kohei Sugiwara. Okay, and he was a great graphic designer, and what he has done interestingly is that he's been able to map the eating of food, especially with respect to different types of food. So on the top is the Japanese food, and followed by the Chinese food and the French food and the Indian food. Okay, we can start with the Indian food. Indian food, for example, if you look at it, typically we have all the ingredients around a plate, and we kind of mix and match them. Okay, and the reds are the highs. Okay, and he's shown clouds to show that you are enjoying the food. Okay, so he's used all these semantic metaphors to visual representation of how the food and the flavors are there and how you enjoy it. Okay, the French food is typically eaten in courses. Okay, so you have different courses, and you can see that at some point of time the rainbow comes in, because that's where you really enjoy the food. The Chinese have it again in small bits and pieces. Rainbows comes twice. Okay, and then you have the Japanese food, which is again eaten in very small portions, and yeah, the highs of eating them is shown there. It's a very interesting activity map, a temporal map of what he calls it as the taste map of different food in different cultures. What are spatial mappings? Let's have a look at it. Spatial mappings refer to mapping of artifacts, activities and environments, again connected with your topic, and now shown in relation to each other on a spatial dimension. Okay, so you kind of map all the things that are connected with your subject on a spatial dimension. There are two kinds, very subtle difference between the two. One is physical spatial mapping, that means that you map it on a physical dimension. Okay. The second one is spatial connectivity mapping. Those that you mapped, you can actually link it through connections, so it becomes spatial connectivity mappings. The spatial mappings are also referred to as environment mappings. Let's have a look at the spatial mapping steps. Select the different spaces connected with your topic. The spaces could be to do with your artifacts, with services, with medias, with activities. Then you need to select a space or the location. It could be your building or home, it could be your neighborhood, it could be the town or the city, it could be the state, country or the world itself. So, this becomes the space on which you have to map the different aspects of your topic. Make a list of the different aspects that you need to put on the space and note down these as keywords and organize this in the given space. Okay. You can make use of both the x and y coordinates as directions to do this. Make use of colors to differentiate and arrows to show the connections. So it means that it has started from here and it has gone to the next place. Draw inferences from the mapping and make a list of these inferences. It's very simple. Okay. So, we are looking at an example here. This is a case of mapping all the different things that are part of the village. This is Chikli village, which is about 250 kilometers from Mumbai, and the nearest town is about 17 kilometers. Okay, and it has about 650 households, 4,000 people, mostly agriculture. Okay, and it is on the plains, and at the background are the hills. Okay, and yeah, the community had mobiles. Okay, so this study was done about 10 years back. Yeah, but people still had bought mobiles. Okay, and it's a simple mapping. It's a representational mapping, and you can see the households, the different types of homes. You can see there are a couple of schools there. They own, cattle and sheep, so you have the sheds for them. There's a big temple and there are a couple of small temples, and there are many wells around the village. Okay, so it kind of gives you the complexion of the village even in a given space. So let's say you're doing a study of 5 villages, okay, and if you map all of them like this, you get a picture of how the villages are at a glance. Okay, and it becomes a very useful, reference for your study. Okay, so let's look at another example. This is actually an example of spatially mapped activities in a neighborhood. Okay, so it shows the activities, for example, of a child who lives in the house on the top, and he uses the cycles to go all the way to the school. And in between, mother who works in the museum comes to and takes him to the hospital. And after the hospital, he actually goes to play, and he goes to a neighbor's house and then back to the house again. Okay, but more than everything, it shows the whole neighborhood at one glance. Okay, you can see the green, park areas, the lakes at one glance, and you can see that the households are surrounding everywhere. Okay, so there's a temple, there's a church. So you have all these surrounding this region. There's a mosque there. Okay, so you kind of get the completion of this small township, and you can see that autos play a very important role in traveling between different parts of this small town. Okay, and as you know, the child actually uses this cycle to go ahead. Okay, so extremely simple way to show the life around the neighborhood, which is part of your study. Here, for example, it's the journey from IIT Bombay to Marine Drive. You can see that it's by a student okay, and he's taken auto in the beginning, then the local train, okay, and then he walks all the way from the station to the Marine Drive, which is next to the sea. And he's mapped different things over there. For example, the sound which is there is mapped on the top, okay, and the timings, for example, are put there so you can know that how much time it took. And he's also put greenery around, wherever you could find greenery. Okay, so that's something which you can make out from this. At the starting, IIT is full of greenery, but when you go to town, it's not so much greenery over there. Okay, and he's got also the distance covered. Okay, so these are different aspects that you actually can map on a given space. Okay, and he's also counted the number of steps he's taken. That's 7537, and it took him a duration of about 1 hour 55 minutes. Okay, so very simple to show a journey from one place to another, spatially mapped out. This is another very nice example of how auto rickshaws have come from Japan, okay, and are being used in many countries. Okay, so it's a representation map of the rickshaws of the world. Okay, and you can see a very interesting thing. Originally it came from Japan, but India became a big hub of a manufacturer for auto rickshaws. And you can see that from India it goes to whole of Indonesia, it goes to the neighboring countries. It's used in Sri Lanka, yeah, it's used in Nepal. Yeah, so you can see that it has come from somewhere and then it goes to many places, and there's a bit of transformation in the way the auto rickshaws also look. Okay, so this is a very spatial mapping of the journey of auto rickshaws and how they are being used in different parts of the world. This is a spatial map of the coffee production and consumption. If you look at the big map, the bigger map which is in the center, okay, you can see the coffee production countries, and it's on the tropical region, and you can see that it goes all the way from South America to Central Africa to India to parts of Southeast Asia. Yeah, so these are the regions which actually grow coffee, and it mentions also how much coffee is grown. It also shows the paths in which the coffee which is produced actually travels to the other parts of the world. Okay, and the shorter map in the bottom portion shows the consumption of the coffee. If you look at it, it's mainly consumed in the northern countries. Yeah, it's also consumed not so much, but yeah, a lot more in the northern countries. Okay, so this is a very nice spatial map of how coffee gets consumed, right? So that's a map of this. Okay, this is a very classical map done by Harry Beck long time back, 1933, and it became a really classic because what he did was that he kind of mapped the different parts of the city through which the underground train actually passes through, such that it becomes convenient for people to find the different places. Okay, and for that he did a very simple thing. He aligned these stations along the horizontals, vertical, and the diagonals. Okay, so it becomes extremely easy for somebody to actually locate it in that particular grid. It's not an exact representation of how it happens in real life, but it's kind of a representation of that. Okay, so what happens here is that if you have colors, okay, and directions, it's very easy to say that you take the green line towards the west and you take another blue line towards the north. Okay, so that's a very simple way to give directions, for example. Okay, so now you see, because it was very simple, because of the information is organized such that you can actually retrieve the information in a very simple manner. It has been adopted for most of the metro stations around the world, including in India. This is again a very interesting map of the flight paths shown between the airports. So it shows flights taking off and landing at airports. Connections between 10,000 airports. And you can see Europe is a very big hub. So many flights, landing and taking off from there. North America is also a very big hub. Okay, so at a glance, it kind of shows the connectivity between these different airports. Okay, and spatially represented. Okay, so this is again, I'm showing it to you for reference take. Okay, so this is something which is very, very interesting. Okay, in the language system in India. Okay, what has been done is that the ability of us humans to produce sound has been mapped to our ability to produce these sounds. Okay, so you can see that if you look at the lips, those are the letter forms which can be made by pressing the lips together. Okay, so and if you look at the throat, for example, those are the letters which can be made by from your throat. If you say ka, ka, ga, ga, you're actually using your throat to produce these sounds. Okay, and you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a wonderful way of actually mapping humans' ability to produce sound, and these are mapped to the letter forms, and that's how we learn in school actually. So it's a wonderful way of mapping the sound on a given space. This is again a extremely interesting mapping. It's a spatial smell map of a dog. It's done by Professor Sugiura from Japan. What he has done is that he noticed his neighbor's dog spend different periods of time in different locations when it goes around his house. That's his house. He kind of mapped it over a period of time, okay, and kept the timings, and then he realized that the dog does this because for the dog, the sense of smell is a very, very major component. Okay, and you can see that in the next map, it's a smell map for the dog. Okay, the darker portions are where there is smell, and so it spends more time. For example, the small portion next to the house is where the chickens are. Okay, so it spends a lot of time over there. Okay, so the tree outside the house is where other dogs also come and go. Okay, so it spends a lot of time over there because it can get the smell of the other dogs. Yeah, so you can see that spatially he's managed to do a smell map for the dog, okay, and represent it in a I thought it's a very nice example, unique example. So it's nice to see different examples from different places. Hence it's shown. Okay, so let's sum up. We did 3 types of mappings. Okay, and again I repeat it. You need to do just one of them. The others are for reference. It's always good to know what you can do, and if you feel like it, you can do all the 3 of them. Okay, so first is the artifact mapping, where you can represent either objects or media or services connected with your topic in relation to each other in a given space. Okay, and then the next one is an activity mapping. That means that something which happens across a period of time is actually mapped. The most simple one is you take your user or your product and show one day or a time period in its life. Okay, and next one is a little interesting and more complicated, okay, which is the user journey mapping, where you actually map the timeline, but you also look at other factors which are influencing this timeline. Okay, so that's called as the user journey mapping. Life cycle mapping refers to mapping again with respect to time, but it starts and ends at the same place. Okay, so there's a full cycle in which it happens, and it's nice to show this on a circle. Okay, and you can also do it for products which don't actually have a cycle and you have an intention of making it into circular. Okay, so that's a challenge you have. The last one is a very interesting mapping because it actually maps relationship between different variables connected with your topic, Okay, so you can actually see which are positive connections, which are negative connections, which go in which direction, are they both ways. Okay, so very simple, relationship between the different factors can be done through pings. Okay, and the last one that we just did was spatial mappings. It's also known as environment mappings. The various spaces connected with your topic are mapped in relation to each other. Again, a very subtle difference between the two. You do it on a space, on a physical space, and if you can actually make connections, then it becomes a connectivity mapping. Okay. So again, these mappings which lead to visualizations and seeing your problem on a given space actually helps in cross-relating factors and coming out with inferences. Very helpful, very simple to do, very enjoyable to do. So please try at least one of them in your project. So thanks a lot. This was section T7, week 7. Let's sum it up. We had a look at the design process, analysis part 1. We looked at 3 different tools, artifact mapping, activity mapping and spatial mappings. Again repeating, you need to do just one of them, the others for reference. And we'll apply this now in your project, okay, and then move on to the case studies.